Two waters.
Here we go.
Oh my
Two
God.
waters and that go.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Big Mouth Season 3 panel. Please welcome Nick Kroll, co-creator, executive producer, star of Big Mouth. Jason Mantzoukas Jessi Klein, stars of Big Mouth. And Season 3 of Big Mouth is available at 12:01 BST globally. All right.
All right, so
You don't want to record it.
Right there, producer.
Are you ever afraid you're going to get censored? Because I watch the show with my teenager and sometimes his friends, and I'm like, besides being shocked and heavily entertained, I feel like if they were human beings, then somebody might be arrested.
Sure, we've been part of making the show to begin with was animating it and having adults voice the kids so that we could talk about much more mature content and get away with stuff. And I think we're also incredibly conscious if we're making a joke that steps towards the line or over it, that we comment on it to make it very clear that we are aware of what we're doing. And I think that is helpful in allowing us to do more outlandish, crazy material.
When did you guys have the idea of Big Mouth, the whole concept of it?
Andrew Goldberg and Mark Levin and Jen Flackett, who I co-created the show with, came to me with the idea of a show based on me and Andrew being in middle school. Andrew and I have been friends since first grade, and it immediately made sense. And again, we started talking about the adults voicing kids, which I think allowed animation to be a central focus. And then starting to think of stuff like the hormone monsters, felt like, oh, this can be animated. And can live there. And we sort of ran from there. And it felt like puberty was something that literally everyone goes through, and it's a universal experience. And all you're hoping for, I think, is to create a show that is that people can find a way in on, and everybody's experienced this thing, so it hopefully would be able to have a broad audience.
Right there.
So with Connie taking over for Tyler, the Hormone Monster, how is that going to influence the character of Nick and the rest of the kids?
Well, I think it, in the case of Nick, who had Rick the Hormone Monster, the old man, and then got Tyler, and then Connie, I think it speaks to what I think I felt a bit at that point, and really throughout my life, which is, that your hormones aren't necessarily entirely masculine or feminine. And I think really this season was the first season we wrote after Me Too took hold. And so a lot of the season is the kids struggling with living in a post-Me Too world where women and girls are fed up and angry, and men are trying to understand how to deal with their masculinity. And Nick, I think, finds himself somewhere in between because he has a female hormone monster that he is trying to navigate where he fits inside of all of that.
The Queer Eye guys make an appearance this season. What went into casting them, like getting them on board?
We had the idea of, we're all watching Queer Eye and we just love the show, and we thought that Coach Steve would be a funny person to Queer Eye. Because underneath, he's I like to describe as a melon with a mustache, but underneath that is we always were there might be a good looking guy underneath all that. So we just really approached them. I had met them a bunch of them at Netflix events and knew them a bit casually, and we went through Netflix and went to the show, and they were immediately on board. And trying to coordinate their schedule in between while they were shooting seasons took a little bit of work, but they were down and they were great. And it was just a show that we all loved watching, so we gave it a shot and they were down. It was great. Yeah. Yeah, we did an episode of where the kids put on a musical of the movie Disclosure, the 90s movie, and it came up, we wanted to do a kids musical episode, and we thought what would it be a funny object for it, and I was like, well, the bad example would be like Disclosure, and then it kind of stuck, and I think we kept trying to find another project, but it worked well because Disclosure is this story about women weaponizing sexual harassment and really white upper middle class male paranoia, and it was made 25 years ago, so it's a real 90s kind of movie, and so it ended up being kind of a perfect movie to talk about our way into talking about sexual harassment and everything that has the conversation that the country and the world has been having around that area. And then we talked about it on How Did This Get Made.
The How Did This Get Made podcast, which I'm one of the hosts of, we did an episode dedicated to the movie Disclosure that allowed us to talk about it and then also talk about the episode of the Big Mouth this season.
So Big Mouth does a great job with personifying emotions like the Progression Kitty and Shame Wizard. What's the character design process for these types of characters, and will we be seeing more of that this season?
Jessi draws them all.
I draw them all, but I also I have them all already drawn. So then Nick just tells me which one he needs.
We have an incredible character design team and animators and we I'm trying to think. We in general with character design, as much as possible, we try to, when we cast someone, we try to use that person. Like the Shame Wizard, we had been working on the design for. When we got David Thewlis to voice the Shame Wizard, we then sent the design. We sent our designers pictures of David to then go back in and add some of the details of it. We did the same with a lot of the Ali Wong's character, for example. When we cast Ali, she really feels like Ali, and there's something about giving a real reference to people that adds some weird specificity to the humanity of the characters. Like Mona, for example, who is Missy's hormone monstress, who will be new this season. We got Tandy Newton to play Mona, and that is more like we were drawing. It took a while to find her design, as we took a while to cast and figure out who Mona was, and we landed on her being kind of like a fun London party girl. So when you see the final design, she's sort of in the Connie family of a hormone monstress, but she's got things in, like, we realized like Connie's hair is a very active part of her character. Mona's got shorter hair, and we slowly, as we went along and developed and saw Mona come to life, we then realized like her tail could be something that would be an extra flourish to to just add personality to the character. So we're always trying to find those things in, and once we create some sort of element to it, we try to find the flourishes inside of it.
With hormone monsters, shame wizards, pillows, bath mats, has there ever been something that wasn't that was suggested to be anthropomorphized and they decided not to?
No. I mean, I remember on my birthday last year, there's an episode where we go back to Duke Ellington, where Duke tells the boys about his puberty and how he lost his virginity and discovered ragtime music. And there's a thing in it where a young Maury offers this guy Archdick Ferdinand, and it's the Archduke Ferdinand, like a little, like, World War I German penis.
Everyone gets it. Go on.
And the impetus for World War I.
Yes. So something like that we came up with on my birthday, and you'll see the episode. It's insane. It's a tangent inside the episode. And I just had this moment where I was like, I can't believe this is my job. Like, I really had a moment where it was like, this is my birthday. I couldn't ask for a better gift than saying Archdick Ferdinand and knowing that within a couple weeks there would be a tiny World War I German dick drawn with a funny little mustache. So no, there is no limit, and it's what is the most fun thing about animation, and specifically our show, that any flight of fancy can immediately become a reality, and there's just no limits, no production limits or anything.
I just want to ask about the voiceover process a little bit. Some of the dialogue is so out there. What's it like going through that? Do you have a hard time getting through without laughing? Do you ad-lib a lot? What's that like?
Well, I'll say something and then let them speak. We do as many drafts and polishes as we can, and then we get the scripts in front of Jason and Jessi and the rest of our cast, and they're some of the funniest improvisers and comedic minds working, and we try to suck as much of them out of it as possible.
I'd say one of the best recurring comedy shows in LA is the Big Mouth Table Read that happens, Tuesdays when we're in season. It's the funniest script read by some of the funniest people in town. And they've done a great job writing, but then for us, it's about getting in the booth, preferably together as much as possible, because there are opportunities. We've all known each other for decades. We've all come up in with improv backgrounds, that kind of stuff. So there is an element of playfulness that allows for discoveries in the room that can then turn into recurring bits throughout, or can just be one-off tangents and whatever. But it makes it, the fact that we record together, atypically from a lot of the other animation I've done, the fact that we do record together adds that sense of discovery and that feeling that moment to moment, anything can happen, that I feel like translates to the show quite well.
Yeah, I would just repeat all of those things essentially, and I would just add, I actually don't come from an improv background really. I did stand up, but the show is so good, but even if it was bad, which it's not for me, it is so fun to get to be in the booth with people like Nick and Jason, just doing scenes where I am like getting to play in this way that I never did before. And it truly, there are moments where I almost can't breathe. It's so funny what people
and we always laugh. Like, that's the thing. Everybody wants to know, like, are you afraid you're going to laugh? We just do laugh. We laugh all the time.
It's the beauty of animation is you just reset and start
just
again.
Pick it back up.
But I would also just add that as dirty and hopefully funny as the show is, we're also trying to infuse it with as much sort of sentiment and heartwarmingness as possible. And I believe recording that stuff together is as useful as the improvising that we do, because to be able to act with Jason or Jessi or Maya, or John Mulaney or Jenny Slate or whoever I'm working with, there's a humanity that's infused when you're acting opposite someone versus just doing your lines alone in a booth. And so I find the collaborative process of the more dramatic stuff to be as important to be able to work with other people.
Actually, speaking to that, when you guys started the show, did you have any idea of like the lasting legacy it might have, given that kids can just easily find it on Netflix, and if they're feeling awkward or out of place in their own bodies, they might find some comfort in it?
I think we really thought it was a fruitful area for a show because puberty felt like something that everyone's gone through, and that the stakes were so high. But we really made the show for us, and the fact that kids have gravitated to the show and taken to it is incredibly gratifying. And the idea that a kid who might feel alone or alienated or confused or embarrassed about what's happening to them, the idea that they would watch the show and maybe feel less so in any of those ways is, to me, incredibly gratifying.
I had a friend come up to me and say, I love the show, I'm watching it, it's great, very complimentary. And then he said, and I've discovered that my oldest is also watching it without me knowing it. And that at first made me nervous, but then it has precipitated a number of conversations between us that I would never have brought up, that she would never have brought up. But because we had both shared the show, we could talk about the episode of the show and how it dealt with a thing. And that to me is pretty remarkable, that singular individual experiences can be bringing together parents and children to have conversations that both might have been too embarrassed to start on their own.
Speaking to that, has that changed the way that you write? What does the writer's room look like? And how do you sketch out a season now that you're on for 6? Congratulations.
Yes.
It's not, do you plan out your entire arc for the season? Is it just based on, hey, here's a weird thing that happened in puberty?
It's a combination of things. I think season by season we get together in our room. We've been lucky to maintain a lot of the original writers, and we bring in new people every year and trying to bring in different voices to speak to different versions of what different kids' adolescent experiences are. And then we have tentpole ideas that we're interested in, both storylines like this season there's like Nick is obsessed with his phone because we wanted to talk about what it's like for kids right now and their relationship to their phones and how different it is for them what it was like for us. But we also want to talk about like female girls' experience with masturbation and finding pleasure. And
I didn't know anything about it. But the writers wrote it for me and I read it.
Yes. And so we have elements like that, or we have like, we know we have started to explore like Jay's bisexuality and we want to explore that more. And then within that, we really just are working on frameworks for a season at a time. We're not really thinking, one, we hadn't been picked up for 3 seasons. But 2, we want to both have a long vision, but also pay respect to the idea that these kids are figuring this stuff out and letting the characters like tell us what they want to be. And like Jay's sexuality, for example, we didn't start out the show being like, oh, this kid is going to be
in season 3, he'll,
Yeah, we just were like, we just knew he was a sexual kid who liked having sex with his pillow. But as we started to write to him, we realized like, oh, maybe this kid is struggling through this.
And that's what's great about the show is that things within earlier seasons can kind of flourish into other storylines, or as these kids grow and age, and as everybody does, confront all of this stuff, the show allows for it while never compromising what's funny or never betraying any of the kids' inherent games or emotional feelings or anything like that.
Yes, and I think like, for example, Jay has these older siblings, it's a mess of a house, but we sort of played with that at first. Season 3, you see Jay kind of basically being abandoned and moving in to Nick's house, because I think all of us in the writer's room knew a kid or were the kid that like had to go stay at someone else's house. And middle school is around that time where it's like, hey, Jay's gonna be staying with us for a little while. And there's a lot of comedy there, but there's a lot of pathos there and a lot of truth that I think people can understand at that period of life, like that happens. And like, we didn't know that was going to happen, but it felt like it was something that we could discover.
It. I mean, look at that house.
I know.
Jay's really in it.
Yeah.
I think that you guys have a really interesting way about putting together your stories for the episode and then the overall season. There are very serious tones that run throughout, but also you have like a very explicit sense of humor. So my question is really just kind of, how do you find that balance in the episodes? Like, how do you make sure the joke doesn't go too far to compromise what the actual meaning is? Like, you were talking about how, you had a friend who came up and talked to you about it. Do you think that they would have had a different reaction if you went a little further with a joke, that they wouldn't have taken maybe the message as seriously?
I think that the show does I think the writers and producers and everybody do an amazing job and have built, like a foundation of not just really funny characters who are just mix them up and they're going to be funny any which way, but like developing genuine, deep, emotional lives for these kids to have, both, and not just the kids, the adults as well. I feel like in exploring the world, in building out from just the kids, you've gotten to know the divorces, you've gotten to know the parents' lives as well, and bringing an emotional depth to them allows for both to be examined without selling either out, without compromising the emotional storylines for jokes, and without the emotional storylines making the jokes feel like they shouldn't be there. I think it's a delicate balance, but one that they've done a kind of masterful job for us to come in and be given an episode where I'm both very emotionally distraught because I've been like home alone by my parents, but then also be able to make like deeply funny sex, like dirty jokes, and have both be possible because they are the expression of this kid's careening id and insecurities. I think that's kind of great. that it's not just one or the other, in other words.
Jason had mentioned aging and growing, which isn't something you often see in animation. And I'm wondering if we'll eventually see the kids deal with these kind of issues in high school while they get a little older.
We're aging look, a show about puberty feels like it owes the evolution and that we see the kids change. We're also doing it, the joy is that we don't have to like do it too fast like when your other coming of age shows where the kids just physically mature. So we're kind of slowly aging them. I mean, I assume as we age them, we'll continue to have those kids deal with the realities of what feel age appropriate, you know? So like, that's the simplest answer I can give.
But they're not like other animated characters who are frozen in time.
Correct.
You know, they're not Bart Simpson is Bart Simpson is Bart Simpson is Bart Simpson. Like, these kids are already older than they were in season 1.
Yeah.
You know, but they're not, I don't think season 5, they're going to be juniors in college.
Correct.
You know.
Have there been any topics that you've tried to touch on that you haven't gotten a chance to?
Yeah, I mean, we have tons of stories that we're still kind of trying to tell. Like, we haven't, it seems so simple, but we haven't told a good acne story yet. Like, we haven't figured our way into that, like, hygiene stuff, which I think kids are, like, trying to figure out. Or hair, you know, like, things like all type versions of hair, you know. So, like, there are stories like that we haven't quite figured out. But we're slow, you know, the beauty, again, is, like, you know, there seems to be no end to the amount of stories in adolescence and puberty to tell, and I think we're, you know, patiently trying to, you know, make our way through them.
Shows based in Westchester. As somebody who grew up and raised in Westchester, why'd you pick that area, and where in Westchester is the town and the school to go to?
Well, Andrew and I grew up in Westchester. I grew up in Rye, and Andrew grew up in White Plains. And so it just felt like that was our experience. So it felt like a decent place to set it, and just, you know, felt like suburbs, and it was the easiest place for us to speak honestly to what our experience was like.
I would assume on some occasions, some topics come up in the writer's room that somebody may feel is just pushing it too far. You come across that a lot? Do you decide to put it in? Or?
You know, the beauty of animation is you have so many different moments within the process to figure out where the line is. So, you know, we've got a table read, we've got a record, we've got a radio play, we've got an animatic, we've got a color final screening. So at every one of those stages, you can leave a joke in, and if it doesn't feel like it's appropriate anymore, then you pull it out. We're, you know, there's certain things where like, oh boy, that's a lot of, you know, masturbation jokes, that's a lot of shit jokes, that's a lot of fart jokes, whatever it is, you find that line, and you know, we screen episodes, and we can, with everyone in the office, and so at the animatic stage and at the color stage, so that is a very helpful way.
Every episode we've recorded, Jay has, for example, violent diarrhea.
Yeah.
Every episode, and yet it just gets cut out every time. So one of these times there's going to be just a full diarrhea episode.
Well, I mean, just to be
the
fair,
diarrhea.
To be fair, that's your improvising, Jay.
To be fair, and this is where a little bit of my life comes into play
method.
for Jay.
What
Speaking
Jason,
of which, I gotta go to the bathroom.
Yeah, this is Jason's method. Is that he always every week.
Every character I play has violent diarrhea.
Well, you hold it all week.
Yes. He has a big plate of fettuccine Alfredo, and then comes with a record.
Yeah, I take one wet dump a week. One wet dump a week.
I mean, I feel like, do you have journals?
Sadly, I have, like, I started keeping a little little diary, I think when I was like 8 years old, and I still have it. And it went through junior high, and reading it is the most excruciating, horrendous thing to
Really?
read. I mean, just
Would you read to us now from it?
no, it's just it's so vividly horrifying in terms of, I think when I occasionally, like, anytime I move, I find it in a box and I reread it, but it's just how earnestly everything was felt, and that everything felt so big, but also just like there was no irony or sarcasm, like in the experience. There was no other perspective when you're that age other than just being in it. And I have to say, like, reading scripts, the writers are so good. There are things that are in there that I haven't thought about in a long time, and then all of a sudden I'm reading an episode and it really, something very vividly comes back to me. I mean, a lot of stuff about getting your period and the awkwardness around that.
And I write all of that stuff.
Nick handles that stuff. They don't want
They don't let me write it because I haven't gotten my
that.
period.
Yeah.
And Nick really has a handle on it. But it's one of the things that's fun about the show is getting to kind of be reminded of those moments in life that you've either forgotten or purposely blocked out. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't keep journals, but I think what I find ironically is that the stuff that I'm talking about in therapy, so much of the stuff that I'm talking about in therapy is stuff that started or manifested itself in this period of time of adolescence. And so the show is this incredibly weird kind of therapeutic back and forth of me talking about what I'm going through now and how what happened to me at that age affected that, and then bringing that into the room and having that come into the room, and then using some of the things that come up in episodes as a means to try to understand what it is I'm going through now.
We have time for 2 more questions.
So you built a world full of just colorful characters, some even popping up just for a scene or maybe 2 episodes. Are there any characters that we haven't really focused on yet that are going to be moving more to the forefront in the upcoming season?
Well, I think we're a character like Matthew, voiced by Andrew Reynolds, started the show as sort of our like sassy gay kid, and he continues to be incredibly funny and sassy, but we were really interested in digging in more with him and understanding, talking to that experience in a real way. So that's kind of exciting. I mean, I don't know. It's like it's all sort of a jumble in my head, but that's kind of interesting.
Well, Allie's character, although I guess hasn't been introduced yet, but is introduced and is a major part.
Yes.
There are new characters.
Yes, and Jay continues to have nuanced relationship with his pillows.
Don't worry about it.
When you make the show, and since it started, has there ever been someone you want on the show, or like when you talk to fans, has there been like a top request for someone to be on the show?
Well, we tried to get Howard Stern to be Nick's, the hormone monster up in the Department of Puberty. I wrote a letter to his agent. He politely declined because I think he'd be a pretty good hormone monster.
And as a fan,
yeah,
as a fan of Howard Stern, I think he would love this show as well, because he talks so much about his life during this era of time for him and how important it is to the person he is now. I think he would really be into it.
And I think he actually at one point mentioned it, but and also because Ronnie, the limo driver, is a hormone monster.
Yeah.
I mean, he truly is. So we have, but we've been incredibly lucky that the people we've gone out to have largely said yes to doing the show, and we've been blessed with, I think, the most talented voice cast in animation. So very grateful for that.
Can we do one more? I feel like you raised your hand every time and never got called on.
Uh-huh. I mean, I think the references to the New York area are just, it's where I grew up, and
Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets. You know, like Jesse grew up in the city. We bonded years and years ago about both being Mets fans growing up, and I just think I mean, Coach Steve, for example, is to me such a New York character.
It's a New York show.
It is a New York show, and so it's, you know, we're pulling from whatever our little pop culture Rolodex. We all have different ones, and you're pulling out like a card, and so a lot of them end up being that to New York area specifics. But it's just, I think there is universality and specificity. So I think, like, if a show takes place in New York, you make a lot of New York references, but people in Canada and Mexico and Idaho will appreciate it, even if they don't even understand specifically the reference. They understand.
That's how lived in the characters are.
Yeah.
That, you know, it's those type, pulling in those little things really make you feel like you are watching a fully three-dimensional, wholly lived character.
Yeah, who happen to be cartoons.
And also, let's go Mets.
Yeah, let's go.
Is it over for them?
Yeah,
it's their
they
hour.
fired their manager.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you.